World Boss is an IO-type kind of game that was made by two massive YouTubers, Lazarbeam and Fresh, who have a combined subscriber count of almost 30 million subs. They are both wildly successful Fortnite YouTubers, with Lazarbeam even showing up in some of MrBeast's videos every now and then. So the game that they're making, World Boss, is a casual arena multiplayer shooter where you eliminate players to level up, unlock perks, climb the in-game ladder, and become, well, the World Boss. You know, that's the thing you want to be. And with these two YouTube titans backing the game, you would think that World Boss would have one of the biggest explosions in player base anyone's ever seen, but that could not be farther from the truth, actually. So with the game having such massive potential for blowing up, the question on everyone's mind is, what exactly happened to World Boss? How did a game that had such huge exposure end up just dead in the water? Let's start off from the beginning. World Boss entered open beta in October of 2022, and they were pitching the idea of an FPS game with custom build progressions through randomized perk selections as you level up. You can get random perks, you can get random weapons while you're leveling up, and it's all in a free-for-all 14-player lobby. It was a very simple concept and a much more casual experience versus what people were actually expecting from Lazarbeam and Fresh, because, you know, they came from Fortnite, so people were expecting something that was kinda like Fortnite at least. The game was designed to be basic multiplayer shooter fun, so it was supposed to be a very quick and easy engagement, you know, for people with like low attention spans. You get in and you're already in the game. There's no waiting period. You also came with a limited amount of lives that you could lose before you're reset back to level 1 to keep the leaderboards always changing and, you know, make sure no one's really hogging the top spot as World Boss. Because once you got to the top of the leaderboard and became World Boss, not only did you get a massive HP buff and a crown that everyone can see on the map so they know where to find you, but you also got the ability to corrupt sectors of the map and shut them down entirely, kind of like you're playing a battle royale and there's the ring that's enclosing. Well, you as the World Boss, you get the chance to go to sectors and shut them down and basically make them inaccessible for other players. This is where the other people who were not World Boss were incentivized to team up and take you down, because once the World Boss corrupted 3 sectors, the game was basically over. The World Boss won and it completely shut down the server. So it was a really easy concept to sell right off the bat and honestly pretty hard to mess up. And with Lazarbeam and Fresh announcing the game and showing off the gameplay in the videos, which gained millions of views by the way, these videos popped off pretty hard. Leading up to the release of the game, it was looking like this was going to be the next flavor for everyone to try out. The game was gonna pop. There was no reason for it not to. You know, what could go wrong? But unfortunately, there was a couple of issues that would surface, pretty big issues actually. These things would put a massive damper on the hype around World Boss leading up to its release and, you know, negatively affect how the game would be perceived. Starting off with network and optimization. So World Boss suffered from a lot of networking issues during its closed beta that unfortunately weren't really fixed following up to the game's release. You know, I'm pretty sure they were working on it, but they just couldn't get everything fixed up before the game entered open beta, with a lot of players reporting that they were being kicked out of the game multiple times per hour, which was basically a game-breaking issue for them because once you got kicked out back to the lobby, you basically lost all your progress. You know, all the grind that you were making to get to rank 1, it's gone. It's not happening. Back to square one, baby. So a lot of people never even got the chance to be World Boss in the first place. It's not like they were in the lobby with players that were much better than them. The game's server issues were actively working against them. So combining that with the fact that the game was just terribly optimized in the first place, based on how simple and easy the game looks, you know, graphically this thing does not look demanding, but people with mid-range PCs were reporting that they were just suffering from lag spikes. So if they were suffering, I'm pretty sure that people with low-end PCs just never really stood a chance in the first place. So because of those two little issues and a couple more we're going to talk about, World Boss instantly bombed on Steam with overwhelmingly negative reviews from angry players. And despite the fact that the developers were actively working with these issues, they were aware of them and they were pretty vocal about how much progress they were putting into fixing the bugs, you know, that wouldn't really get addressed and fixed completely until much later. Which was an even bigger issue because while they were having constantly crashing servers and laggy gameplay, World Boss had a battle pass that they were trying to push really hard. I guess I really shouldn't say really hard. They had it there and they came out with founders packs with Lazarbeam and Fresh. You know, they had all this cosmetics and monetization while their servers were basically flopping around. So it wasn't really a good look for them, and honestly speaking, dude, in my opinion, you know, monetization in a game that you release isn't the worst thing in the world. You know, getting additional funds for the game that you're developing is literally what the gaming industry is built on, right? You want to make money, so that way you can keep making stuff for the game. So it just makes sense, right? But the problem here is that offering cosmetics and microtransactions for a game that's barely able to run in the first place didn't really sit well with the player base, and a lot of people felt like World Boss was kind of like a cash grab. It felt like they were focusing more on putting skins on the market versus actually fixing the core gameplay issues that the game was going through at the time. I don't necessarily think that's how it went because the developers were very vocal and open with the community, you know, talking to them about how they were fixing and how they were aware of things, and they were really, you know, they were really present in social media, which is a good thing that you don't really see every day, but that doesn't help the fact that people still view them in a certain way because of that issue. And going back to the gameplay here, even when the players were able to get into the game and play the game as intended, a lot of them just actually weren't having fun in the first place. They were reporting that the game felt really bland, boring, repetitive. You know, it just got boring. You know, it was technically an endless deathmatch where you got in, got some kills, died, respawned, got some kills, died, rinse, repeat. And remember how I mentioned that the game's objective at first was to become the world boss so that way you can start corrupting the server and shut down the game, and that was your win condition? Yeah, well, they didn't add the corruption bombs until 8 months after the game had been out, so on release, the objective was really to just be world boss and just have an HP buff, and that's it. The idea was the other players were supposed to go after you and kill you, but none of them really did that. They kind of just kept shooting each other. You know, it was just like, oh, there's just one guy who's really strong on the map, let's just ignore him and just keep fighting people who are at my level instead. That's kind of what the people were going for. And another thing that wasn't added until way later was a live system in the game, you know, having a limited number of lives. So when the game first came out, upon death, you really were not losing or risking anything. You know, you were not losing your levels or your progression, and people that were on the top and that were dominating the server kind of just stayed on top. People were really camping the world boss title, and it was really hard for you to take them down. So the only way that you could become world boss in an already established server was if they decided to prestige to reset their levels back to 1, or they just got tired of dunking on the server and just left the game. So with extremely unstable servers on release, people seeing the game as a cash grab, and just having overall boring and repetitive gameplay, this was obviously not a good look for Lazarbeam and Fresh to have their names tied down to this, because it made them look like they just got paid to stick their names on the label and get a fat paycheck out of it. But that's just the overall feeling of how some of the players felt. I personally think that they had a lot of involvement in it, and it's just something that they're passionate about that unfortunately just did not have a really good start. So having all those big nerfs that the game had on launch already in mind, how do you guys think the game did on release? We already know about what the game is like now. We already know that it's dead now, but when it first came out with that big marketing push from those two massive YouTubers, how did World Boss perform? Well, let me just say this real quick. I was really surprised by this. Like, I was not expecting these numbers whatsoever. And in fact, I had to search for different websites for different charts to just verify, because I was just like, no, that can't be real, man. But World Boss released an open beta with a concurrent player base of 1,300 players. Only 1,300. And the reason 1,300 is so dumbfounding for me is that Lazarbeam and Fresh, they both made, okay, they only made one video to market the game. It's not like they turned their whole channels into like YouTube World Boss promo for a week, but those two videos got millions and millions of views with tons of positive engagement, but they could only pull in 1,300 concurrent players on release. After that, by the way, the game just nosedived. It just went straight down. But I got the chance to play the game myself when it released, and I did have some networking issues here and there, but my biggest complaint wasn't surprisingly the networking issues or the monetization or the gameplay itself, because the gameplay was really fun. No, I actually think that the concept of World Boss was actually really fun, you know, for what it was intended to do. World Boss was designed to be like an IO game, so it's supposed to be a quick, casual, dumbed down experience. It's not supposed to be some grandiose Fortnite-like storyline with complex characters and whatever Fortnite is these days. And I think a lot of people really expected that when they heard Lazarbeam Fresh make game. They were like, wow, Lazarbeam Fresh make Fortnite. No, my biggest complaint is that the game released on Steam, and to this day, it's only on Steam. So there was no console release, and there was no mobile release, and looking at the game looks like it would just pop off really hard on mobile, just because of how basic it is, but also how accessible it is, you know? I look at World Boss and I'm like, damn, I would play this game if I was sitting and waiting around at a dentist's office or something. But because it didn't release on console and it didn't release on mobile, you know, you have to consider the fact that a lot of the Fortnite kids that watch Lazarbeam and Fresh, they probably don't have $3,000 gaming PCs. They probably just play from their PlayStations or their phones. So already they're chopping off a massive potential in player base by just not releasing on those medias, on those avenues. So unfortunately, because of all those factors, and most likely a bunch of them that were behind the scenes, World Boss flopped really hard on release. Which is a shame, because like I mentioned, I really enjoyed the game when it came out, and it's not like the developers were purposely trying to throw out a mediocre product. You can tell based on their social media presence that they actually really enjoy the game. They actually really enjoy working on it, and to this day, they're still updating it. And I think that one of the key factors that really mess with the game's popularity is something that I actually see a lot of gaming companies start doing now, which is releasing a game really early into the game's development cycle and just take the players along for the ride. You know, this whole, I want to be transparent and I want to show you guys what we're doing. Come over here, look behind the curtain. It's all fine and dandy because you're promoting the fact that you're just very communicative with the player base, but there's two really big issues that I have with that whole development philosophy. And number one is that whether you like it or not, first impressions are like everything, especially in video gaming. If you release a broken product and you give the players the chance to try out and give them the miserable experience of something that's just not finished, you're already gonna leave a sour taste in their mouths, so that way when you actually go around and fix everything, they already have a bad impression of the game and they're not gonna want to try it out. You know, so the perfect example I have for this is No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077. I hear that they're both really amazing games to try out now, but I think you remember how the launch went for those two games, and I know that there's a lot of people that just outright refuse to give the games a chance just because of how bad the launch was. And the other reason that releasing your games in super early access isn't always the best idea is that, yes, while you release early, people can play the game early, and you can use player feedback to see what you can improve on, and they can help you find bugs for you to fix. Unfortunately, no player really wants to feel like an unpaid game developer. You know, not everyone wants to feel that way because some people might feel like they're just being taken advantage of by game developers. And I'm not saying that all game developers have this in their intentions when they're releasing super early access, but you can't deny that there's a couple of them that really do that. So in the end, what happened with World Boss really sucks. You know, I wish the game had a second chance or a second win because in its current state it's actually really fun. And the developers, you can tell that they really love the game because of how hard they keep working on the game. And I think that Lazarbeam and Fresh had a pretty cool idea. They made a pretty cool game. It just had a couple of really rough patches along the way. And yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about with you guys today. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.